it's something extraordinary, and the fact that we got them back, as the president promised, in reasonably good health, the large number of them, is something to cheer, one another about. It's quite extraordinary.
And just tell us where the girls are now. What's happening with them?
They are in Abuja as I speak to you now, and they'll be meeting the president at midday tomorrow.
Are all of them in Abuja?
All of those who have been received, the number as it stands now is 104,
right,
plus those 2 extras.
Right, but of course there were some girls who died.
I have no confirmation of that. 5 have not been accounted for.
Well, I can tell you unequivocally that I spoke to the parent right in front of my eyes of one of the people from the neighboring town of Jangam, I think it was called Jangpam, whose daughter died, and he was there clearly in grieving mode, and it was quite sort of extraordinary to watch him, as sad as he was, in the midst of all these people celebrating. How did the government secure their release?
There was the incident with the University of Maiduguri lecturers, which a government chose to negotiate with the Boko Haram terrorists, and it led to their own freedom, those on petroleum exploration in the northeast. Now, part of the agreement reached with Boko Haram was that they would no longer abduct persons. And so when this happened, this matter was raised with them, that this is in breach of your own agreement with us. And bad faith was cited. And so therefore, it struck them somehow. And they said, okay, perhaps maybe some lacuna communication from top, to lower levels. This thing happened, but they offered to return the girls, all of the girls in their possession. And that's what they did. They drove them into the community, dropped them off, and left.
I saw that happen. I was actually at a checkpoint, a military checkpoint just outside DAPCHI, and literally across the road, because the army stopped us. They said there was an ongoing operation, that we could be shot by Boko Haram. That's what they said. A lot of people were stopped who were driving on that road. And we looked across the horizon, and there was a convoy of vehicles. It was later that we discovered that they were actually dropping the girls off. And what you're saying to us, Garba, hand on heart, is that the government did not make any concessions, and I'll start by using a neutral word, concessions, to the militants.
Yeah, all of the facts available to us clearly indicate that no payments were made, no exchanges of persons in detention was done in this case.
Because we're hearing something to the contrary. We're hearing that a certain amount of money changed hands. And, I mean, analysts are looking at it who are very familiar with that situation. And it seems, I mean, almost impossible, I mean, difficult to believe that Boko Haram would go and abduct up to 110 girls for no reason, just, hey, let's go abduct some girls. And then at the end of it, say, oh, sorry, we abducted girls, we're going to give them back to you. I mean, it just doesn't, it beggars belief. You see what I mean?
Yeah, I know that when people, when they hear this story, they would, maybe they will believe us in half. But then, this is what happened. And that, well, if anybody has evidence that money has exchanged hands, it's an open, free society. They can reveal these things. For all of the facts that are made available to us, for all we can see, nothing of that sort took place. And don't forget that there's a serious engagement by the Nigerian government under President Muhammadu Buhari with these terrorists. And the whole idea is, beyond all of these kidnappings and the release of girls, including those in Chibok, we want to establish permanent peace.
Yeah, but what is it that the terrorists are getting from this relationship that you're talking about? That there's got to be a sort of quid pro quo, give and take. What are you giving them? What are they taking from you?
Well, you know, at the initial stage, we did make the admission ourselves that some of their, you know, operatives were let go part of the
Did you let them go this time? 'Cause
No,
that's
no,
also
no,
something
nothing
that's
of that
been
sort has taken place.
speculated.
I said from the beginning.
Right.
And some of these agreements were, concretized from the beginning. And it is clear that, look, they are members of the Nigerian society themselves. And for many of them, they wish to resume normal lives. Indications we are getting is that maybe some fatigue of sorts has set in with some of them, and they wish to resume normal.
Who are we talking about? Because we know for a fact that there are two factions, rival factions within Boko Haram. There's the Al-Banawi faction, and then there's the sort of the Abubakar Shekau faction, who has all along been known as the leader of Boko Haram. Which faction have you been dealing with?
Well, I think at the level of analysis, people can begin to go into all of these things. But as a government, in our own interest, we have a Boko Haram problem, and we're dealing with Boko Haram.
No, but what I'm asking you is very straightforward. I mean, I don't understand why there's reluctance in answering it. There are two factions of Boko Haram. Which faction are you dealing with?
Well, as I said, we hear a lot of these things.
Right.
That it is factionalized, one hardline,
right.
one...
Were you dealing with Abu Musa al-Banawi?
In this particular instance, as I said, from the point of view of government.
Right.
It's Boko Haram we're dealing with. We have a Boko Haram problem, and we're trying to bring everyone to the table to solve the problem all at once, so that peace will permanently return.
So what stage are you now with those negotiations? Because as I speak to you now, we're hearing of an incident that took place on the 1st of March where people from aid agencies were killed by Boko Haram. So clearly there is still a fight going on. It's not over.
It will take time to establish good faith.
Right. So what I want to understand is, what was the basis on which they made concessions to you by releasing 110 girls? 104 girls who are in captivity.
On the basis that there was a prior agreement to which they signed, which is that they would no longer steal persons. They would no longer kidnap and keep.
And that agreement was signed when?
After upon the conclusion of discussion with them on the issue of the University of Maiduguri lecturers.
Right. Why has the Nigerian government chosen to go against the general drift of most international governments to negotiate with people who have perpetuated extraordinary violence on this country?
Well, it depends on, that Nigeria Air Force could easily have bombed suspected locations. But at the end of the day, you'll not be bringing happiness. You'll be bringing coffins to the families. Is that the idea? Is that what we want? I think the president made his own choice. And it's a very courageous one indeed, which is that he wants to bring back these girls alive in one piece. And this is what we have succeeded in doing.
Right. What is the state of the war right now? Because what we find extraordinary, Garba, is the fact that, I mean, I drove through, from Maiduguri to Damaturu to DAPCHI. And, this is vast open, shrubs all over there. I mean, open, almost desert-like. I'm wondering how it is possible that one of the most powerful armies in Africa is unable to detect the movement in such open terrain, and at a time when you've got satellites, you've got technology, you've got drones, you have the Americans, the British, the French operating around those areas in neighboring countries like Niger, Chad, and so on. How is it that these people can spirit away 110 girls, and there is absolutely no knowledge of the fact, no confirmation? Because, of course, initially, I mean, you guys said that nothing happened.
No, not for our own part. I think that there was an incident of that mistaken reporting from the local authorities in Yobe. Certainly, Abuja had nothing to do with that misleading information. Now, the thing is that Nigerian government is fighting two wars concurrently.
Right.
When there's the military action against Boko Haram, which, from the conclusions of the military, from their own judgment, Boko Haram has been defeated. Yes, the commanders and the operatives, they have splintered. and some of them don't want to go down quietly. But to say that you just in one fell sweep, you wake up the following morning and then you wave this thing off and you say it's not there. No. Even the Americans and the UK and the French that you cited as being of assistance to us in all of these things, they also record isolated incidents of terrorism in their own territories.
Yeah, but what I'm saying
so
is...
terrorism is resilient.
Right.
It takes time to fight.
Well,
but on the
obviously.
second level also, you got to change, you also have to find an ideology of Boko Haram, which they have entrenched over communities they have governed. Before we came to power, they controlled a sizable section of this country, more than, about 14 local council areas with their flag and system of taxation and all of that. And they preached to people and they converted. So therefore, you are also having to fight, as I said, this ideology, persuade people that no, if this is about Islam, that's not the true Islam that you should be dealing with.
A few months ago, you and your government gave us the impression that the fight was over. You said Boko Haram had been defeated. They clearly have not been defeated. In fact, far from being defeated, they have forced you into negotiating with them. Now, if you get to the stage where you've defeated someone, and you've essentially neutralized them, what would be the point of negotiating with them?
Well, to say that they have been defeated is not to say that the entire ideology has been eliminated and that there are no diehards who had splintered. 1 or 2, 3, 4, 5, they no longer hold territory. As I said, they had foisted an Islamic republic upon the Nigerian soil.
Right. In fairness to you,
yeah.
I have to say that because we have to obviously be balanced in our assessment, and going through northern Nigeria, going through the northeast, I had been there in 2014. I'd been to Maiduguri, I went to Chibok and all of that. Going there today, I was struck by the amount of commerce taking place in a place like Maiduguri, which is a very isolated place. I mean, there were vehicles all over the place, trucks driving up and down, and so on and so forth. And what appeared to be a measure of normality,
that's true.
Which suggests that to some extent you are right, but not to a final extent.
Well, it will take time because in several of these communities, they don't have markets to go to. They've been destroyed. They don't have schools and clinics and churches and mosques. So all of the social infrastructure, including bridges, you'll expect, they have been destroyed. So I think that there is a big struggle by people to just reclaim their territory and resume their normal life,
right,
wherever this is possible. Because even when we talk about 2.5 million people in IDP camps, you know that physically you probably have not more than 500,000 who have to live in those camps. Most have moved squatting with neighbors or friends or relations or in church grounds or mosques and all of that, or schools. Just that they are not satisfied, they're not happy with being in the IDP camps.
Okay, now talking about, you mentioned churches there. Let's just go back to those girls who were freed from DAPCHI and the surrounding sort of villages. We understand that one girl, a Christian, who refused to convert to Islam, is still being held captive. Can you confirm that?
Yeah, we want to believe the girls because this is coming from the narrative, from the girls. I just want to assure that the president just caused a statement to be issued a short while ago, clearly stating that he, as president and commander-in-chief of Nigeria, is conscious of his responsibility to protect the life of every citizen, whether they are Muslim, Christian, their region, or whatever ethnicity, irrespective of all of that. He will do his duty to all citizens. And he said in his words that he feels as committed to the freedom of this girl as he felt when all 110 of them were being held.
Right, and you didn't make the concession to Boko Haram
Absolutely.
to say, well, You know, you can hang on to that one. Let's get this lot out of the way first, and then we'll worry about the young Christian.
No. Then you will not be the president of Nigeria, because the president of Nigeria has a duty to everyone.
But did that come up in negotiations? I mean, because you must have had some sense of the people who'd been captured by Boko Haram. The school had its records, their names and all that were released. So you must have had an idea that, you know, these are the people who are there, and you know, for some reason this person wasn't going to get their freedom.
If I knew this question was going to be raised, I would have asked. But as I speak to you now, I'm not aware of the details, nitty-gritty of all of that leading to why this single one. It is sad, and the sense we have is that nobody is happy, even in Chibok community, where 104 are back, in DAPCHI community. The parents are saying, this is not complete. So,
do you think you've set a bad precedent here? Because what happened with the Chibok girls is that their capture unleashed one of the biggest social media campaigns in history. And it clearly took Boko Haram themselves by surprise, because they weren't expecting it. I mean, suddenly they were on the global stage. I mean, the wife of the president of the United States of America was holding up a card, a thing saying, bring back our girls. I mean, everybody was talking about Boko Haram. I mean, and by negotiating with them, have you set a precedent that tells them essentially that we can do this and get away with it?
No.
I mean, is there any move to try and prosecute? Because kidnapping is a crime.
I know.
I mean, kidnapping, abduction, and of course there are people who've died as a result of that abduction, parents who've lost their children. I mean, is there any move on the part of the federal government of Nigeria to find these people, prosecute them to the full extent of the law?
Well, you know that...
or are you going to let them get away with it?
No, let me say this. Even when you know, you haven't come to the Boko Haram elements, you know that the president has given a firm commitment that all of the Nigerian officials who are found to have been negligent in this DAPCHI case.
We're not talking about Nigerian officials. We're talking about terrorists.
They'll be punished. So I'm saying that it follows that they will suffer punishment if they have. But the thing is that
I don't understand what you mean.
In agreements...
What do you mean it follows that they'll suffer? Are you saying that the people you negotiated with, that you recognize that they are a criminal element within Nigerian society, and that you will go the length of the law to prosecute them?
Well, it depends on how it turns out, because the thing is,
I don't know what you mean by
as we speak now...
It's a very straightforward question. Are you going to prosecute?
No, what I'm saying is that it depends on how the conclusions, how the negotiations are concluded. If there is no end to it, what then means is that not only to prosecute, but the army will continue to fight, and they will ensure that every single Boko Haram is eliminated.
Right, but you're leaving room within this negotiation for people who have wantonly and brutally slaughtered thousands of people to get away with it, basically.
This is not just happening now. The military authorities have announced it's not an amnesty, but have asked any one of them out there who wish to drop their weapons and come back and resume to give up.
Right.
And quite a number of them have been received and de-radicalized. And when the authorities are satisfied that they can resume life in society, they have been discharged and they have resumed life in society, thousands of them. So it depends on how it ends. If there is an agreement saying that this is how it will end, there is forgiveness, there is amnesty, whatever it is, then the Nigerian government as a responsible entity has a duty to follow through.
Right, so the government strategy is to grant them amnesty.
Well,
I mean, I understand what you mean, that ultimately it's better to have peace than war, but is that, we need to be very clear on what the government strategy is. Is that strategy that we're going to negotiate with them and say, listen, we forgive you all your sins and we're going to grant you amnesty? Is that what we can expect?
I'm not a representative on the table. The mandate is not defined to me. But from my own understanding is that this government has chosen to pursue peace in the Northeast in two ways: through military strategy and through negotiations.
Right.
So whichever one yields, the dividends that we want. All of the girls, if these were family members of mine also, I would have been relieved that my girl is back.
Right. What political currents from this DAPCHI incident radiating outwards from there to the rest of the world do you expect to come? I mean, because...
Well, but who isn't doing this? Who isn't doing this?
I don't know.
Didn't Americans get back citizens from North Korea? I mean, it's happened in many countries. So therefore, we are not doing anything.
North Korea is a legitimate government with whom you can go into some form of negotiation.
Did you say it's a legitimate government?
Well, certainly they are the established government. But your final word, I mean, you've been very very generous with your time, and we appreciate that.
Yes,
let's just get your final thought on these extraordinarily momentous
when you said the political
decisions.
thing, I would have liked that we focus here in Nigeria, given all of the things that particularly all of you, the media, are reporting, that somebody, the opposition political party is simply angry that Nigerian governments we've gotten them back.
Right, so you're looking for some political capital from
not
this.
political capital.
Right.
We are saying that somebody went out there trying to see that whether they can establish some political or moral equivalency between a Muhammadu Buhari administration and a Jonathan administration, which failed to act on Chibok girls 2 weeks after they were stolen.
Right.
In the belief that it was a conspiracy of northern political elite against a southern political leader, and so therefore they just didn't do anything about it.
Okay, Garba.
Here's the difference.